Welcome to our first roundtable of 2023. My name is Ann Vasquez, the CEO of EdSource. For more than a year, EdSource has delved deeply into California's reading dilemma. Nearly 60% of California children don't meet state standards by third grade. Our ongoing series has produced more than a dozen stories and an array of commentaries, podcasts, and even an earlier roundtable. We took note of the ongoing national debate over how to teach reading and have spent countless hours trying to cut through the noise and focus on what works and why. Today, we want to direct our discussion toward parents and teachers who are on the front lines of California's literacy crisis. What should be done if your child or student is falling behind in reading? Many thanks to the entire team at EdSource who have led our year-long coverage, including today's moderator, Karen D'Souza, and our investigations and projects editor, Rose Ciota. If you don't already, you should follow us on Twitter and social media and sign up for our daily newsletter. It's a great way to keep your finger on the pulse of all things education. And lastly, EdSource would not be able to bring us all together for our monthly roundtables if it weren't for the support of our funders. A big thank you to the McClatchy Foundation for making today's roundtable possible. Now, for our introductions. First, I'd like to welcome to our panel Susan Pimentel, founding partner of Standard Works and Student Achievement Partners. She is one of the nation's top literacy experts. Welcome. Please also welcome Candida Elias, a first grade teacher at Joshua Elementary in Lancaster School District. Next, I'd like to introduce Megan Bacigalupi, who is the co-founder of California Parent Power, a statewide parent advocacy organization that's focused on literacy. I'd also like to give a special welcome to Ruelvis Alonga, who is part of the parent tutor team at Oakland Reach, also a parent-run advocacy organization. Moderator today, as I mentioned earlier, is our very own EdSource reporter, Karen D'Souza. Welcome, everyone. Karen, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you so much, Anne. And thank you actually for assigning me this project. I think it was like a year ago. I'm going to admit to everyone my own ignorance. I knew, of course, that rising adult illiteracy was a serious issue in our society. I had no idea that more than half of California children at third grade couldn't read at grade level. That still strikes me as a really shocking statistic. And my question for you guys to start us off and set the table is, how did this literacy crisis get so bad, and how did it fall under the radar for so long? Why is it that so many parents might be unaware of it? Sue, Megan?
I'll jump in and then love to hear from Megan about the California circumstance. So the reason we have so many kids across the nation who can't read, Karen, is because so many aren't getting daily, explicit, systematic, foundational skills reading in K1, 2, and 3. And the reason for that might be shocking to some parents. Two basic reasons I see. One is that teacher preparation programs don't prepare teachers to teach it. Amazing, shocking. Hasn't been done all these years. And the thing is about foundational skills, and obviously teachers know this, but it's like foundational skills are like a cluster of interrelated sub-skills that the brain needs in order to learn to read. And so it's not like other literacy skills. So teacher just can't go onto the classroom and say, okay, now I'm going to teach foundational skills. And so that's the number one issue I hear, and I'd love to hear what Megan has to say with this after I give my second one, Megan, and then the floor is yours, which is then teachers are handed curriculum and some popular curriculum, which I know are in use in California, minimize phonics, and then they do something as bad or worse. They use the 3 cueing system, some of them. Some of the most prominent ones. And I can get into that, Karen, about what the 3 cueing system is. But just to say to parents, it takes you away from phonics and has kids guess at words given the cues in their reading. So those are two basic reasons why we are where we are.
I'll jump in. Thank you, Sue. And you alluded to this, and I know EdSource is reporting, and there are probably a lot of terms that are going to get thrown around today that to parents will be new. The first one I'm going to mention is balanced literacy. And EdSource has a whole glossary of terms that parents can go to kind of understand when we throw these out: balanced literacy, structured literacy, science of reading. But as Sue alluded to, balanced literacy is very much alive and well in California. And that is the reason that the majority of kids in the state do not read at grade level, period, point blank. And our state leaders have done nothing to change that. There are states that have sort of, comprehensive reforms where they have actually mandated certain curriculums be used and banned certain curriculums from being used. And I know that term sounds scary when you're talking about parents, because we hear in a totally different context that I will admit is crazy usually. This is not. There are curriculums that will not teach kids how to read, that do not give teachers the tools to teach kids how to read. And I, as a parent, I will say I have seen it firsthand with my own kids. My children attend school in Oakland Unified. Oakland Unified is actually one of the few districts that have made the switch from balanced literacy to structured literacy in recent years. But I had one kid who predated that switch and one who has been in K1 after. And being in the classroom and seeing firsthand what Sue described as 3Qing with, by the way, a dyslexic child who we didn't know at the time was dyslexic, harmed him. It harmed thousands of kids in this district because they never were given the systematic, explicit instruction that literally just cracks the code in your brain. I explain it this way to parents all the time. And by the way, I'm not a literacy expert like Sue. I'm just a parent of a dyslexic kid. Learning to read.
Same difference though, right? You've become an expert.
I'm trying, Erin, I'm trying. But learning to read, this is what I'll end with. Learning to read is not like learning to speak. We learn how to speak very easily, right? It is not the same with reading. We need explicit instruction. And almost every child does, not just dyslexic kids, but the majority of kids need that, and they're not getting it in California.
Now that leads me to a follow-up question. So if the science of reading is settled science, if we understand how the brain works and why children need certain foundational skills, why is it still so controversial?
I would say that, like everything in education policy, it becomes this sort of politicized fight. I mean, I have recently heard people say that structured literacy is a conservative talking point. That's nuts to me, right? It is settled science, right? And I actually wish we would frame this in a way that this actually isn't really just an education issue. It's a civil rights issue. Kids need to learn how to read to live. Like if you look at the percentage of kids who are dyslexic in this country, the numbers will vary. People will say maybe it's 10 to 15%. You look at prison populations, it's often around 50. So that school to prison pipeline is just paved with illiteracy. So this is a civil rights issue, not just an education issue. I think the framing of it has been part of the problem, Karen. And I wish policy leaders, educational leaders, all of us would like wrap our heads around that. And I think we'd all be on the right side then.
And could I just add a couple of things to that? One is that there's been a steady group of educators who believe that phonics runs counter to this constructivist theory of reading. And what Megan, you were just talking about is that somehow they think that you learn to read naturally if you just immerse yourself in a literature-rich environment. And that runs counter, as Megan said, to the research. And the other thing that I hear a lot, and maybe I hear this from teachers, and Candida may want to jump in here too, Candida, because I've heard that, it's drill and kill. It's drudgery. Kids are going to hate it. And what we forget, as Megan said, is about cracking the code. It's like opening up like the magical world for students. And so I hear this drill and kill thing, but I don't see it in kids.
Yeah, and I think there's a process that we need to go by. With phonemic awareness, we need to understand first where are our kids at. And the very beginning that they need that oral language, like kids that are able to understand what is being said to them. We move on to phonemic awareness. We pay attention to what are the sounds that these kids are being able to hear. Eventually phonics will come. But once they know their sounds, they're able to blend the words together, they're able to decode what they're reading, and then fluency comes into place. But we can't jump there and do that constantly and drill sight words to them, constantly have them trying to memorize it. They need to be able to decode these words. And I agree, there needs to be a scope and sequence that the teachers are following a good curriculum that focuses on this explicit systematic approach for reading. So in our school, we're actually doing SIPs right now, and I think it's a great program. We did do Wonders, which was kind of I'm not going to say bad about it, but we had to pick and choose. It was all over the place. But this program that we're doing right now, it has a good flow, and I'm seeing the progress in my kids. We have a progress monitoring binder. We collect data since day one. Where did this kid come into school? Progress monitor every few weeks and see where are they at and showing the growth. Now, as a second semester, first grade teacher, I'm seeing these kids, they're decoding, they're reading. So now let's work on fluency. Now we can go to the questions and comprehension. So, but we need to start from the beginning. Where are the kids at the beginning of the year?
Yeah,
It's so rewarding to see progress, right? I'm sorry, Royal, let's continue.
no, I was just going to say, I totally agree. I work as an early literacy tutor for OUSD, and we work with SIPs, and I work closely with my teacher, and we do a lot of monitoring, and we are doing decoding. And it's also a matter of how you approach what you're teaching. If you do it like rote and make it really boring, because I tried to do it kind of like that because it seems so systematic. It's SIPs, systematic instruction in phonetical awareness. And I was like, okay, this sounds kind of tough. But then I adjusted the way I approached the kids, and I made it like, you know what the prize is? The prize is you learn how to read. And if you encourage them, their mindset changes. And that's what I've learned through experience.
Love it, Ruelas, my hero.
Yes. Every progress that they make is just affirming these kids, teaching them that they're all at different reading levels. You cannot compare them and have them at one equal place. They're all going to learn a different way, and it's okay. And if they're struggling, make it a normal thing. We all struggle. I struggle, but the little progress you made, praise them, affirm them, have rewards, have them look forward to, especially with small groups. I think that's very important in primary, doing small group instruction with the kids, but being consistently teaching these programs, especially starting with phonemic awareness. What sounds are they lacking? What are they missing in their vocabulary? And then being able to transfer it to blending. Are they able to put the sounds together? And then that transfers into their writing. Are they able to do dictation and use the sounds that they know to write words? And also with reading comprehension.
I did
I
want to
think that's
jump
so
in.
important that we can all struggle. My daughter recently read A Tale of Two Cities, and she honestly struggled through a lot of that. And I tried to make it like a point of pride. It's good to struggle. Things should be hard occasionally. And that's really how you get to be a better reader. But go ahead, Anne.
Yeah, I just want to say that the Q&A is starting to blow up with lots of questions. And so I just want to periodically chime in with a question from the audience. And one of the first questions we received was, what advice would you give to parents or community members who are seeking a curriculum change in their district? And this is open to anyone.
I can jump in. I think I did tell the person, which is exciting. We are going to have a toolkit for parents next month that'll help them kind of, at the local level, right? It's advocacy to your school board, your superintendent, even talking to your own, principal and teachers to understand. I mean, certainly, as Candida can say, part of the problem here is one, we often do not give, even in a district like Oakland that has made the switch, implementation is not perfect. It's failing in some places, right? Teachers don't have the professional development. They don't have the support to teach the curriculum. And they're often thrown a new curriculum every few years with almost no support. So we're expecting them to be these miracle workers to understand this new curriculum. And so I think, part of this discussion, right, is really framed in getting parents and teachers on the same page and on board with each other. And I know Candida will talk more about this, but having a strong sort of parent-teacher alliance for your own child and just also to understand what's happening in your district, I think is a good start and really important. But certainly advocating to the leaders in your district that, one, there is data, very clear data to support a change. I think the thing that I've seen that is frustrating is there are some districts recently who have said, we're going to make a change. We're going to take a year plus to sort of evaluate if we should do that. That doesn't need to happen. Districts should be changing now. They also shouldn't be changing under threat of lawsuit or a settlement agreement, which is happening in some districts in the Bay Area, right? So I think that's the biggest piece, and certainly more to come from us soon.
That's a great point. And let me ask this now. If your district isn't going to change, or if it's clear that that's going to be a murky and long process, what should parents know about, like, how do you tell if your child is falling behind? What's a good way to tell? And what do you need to know? Like, where do you go from there? Just in case you're not getting the support you need from the district level.
I think as parents, I've always told them day one, my doors are open. It also depends on the teacher. To be honest, there are teachers that don't want that communication with parents. They want to teach their child and just let them go. But I've always been a firm believer that to have that relationship, it's a teacher, parent, child communication. It's not one way or the other. Back to school night, before school starts, come in the classroom, see where your child is going to sit, review the programs, the curriculum that we're going to be teaching, and bring out, open up to any questions. I've always started my year with just assessing the kids where they're at, especially at the end of kindergarten, see where they're at, what are they missing, and go from there. I've always told my colleagues, let's assess on everything that it's the standard for end of kindergarten, so we know where they're at in first grade. Don't wait for iReady, don't wait for any district assessments. We need to do that the first week. And a lot of what we can see is informal observations. Have these conversations with these kids. Are they speaking in complete sentences? Are they ELs? Are they using different dialects? You can learn so much by just sitting with the kid and having a conversation for 30 seconds, whatever it is. But I believe in homework, and that's the best way. Is I'm constantly in communication with the parents. We do have communication through online. It's an app called Class Dojo that we use at our district, and it's quick text, quick pictures. We don't need to have a full-on conversation over the phone, but no matter what, the doors are always open. And I think as parents, I will say, go to your child's teacher. Sometimes they'll be like, they're okay. I want to see the data. Where is my child? Where was he 2 months ago? Where is he now? Where should my child be in 2 months from now? Preparing them for the next grade level. So be an advocate for your child.
I think you've given some great advice about really, not being afraid to talk to the teachers. I also think that you also said something really important, which I want to say parents can do as well. Read with your child. Ask your child to read to you. If you see them skipping over words, and this should be pretty much a grade level text, you can ask the teacher for one of those. You see them skipping over words, you see them fumbling to look at the cues in the text and say, oh, there's a picture of a rabbit, so therefore it might, then something isn't going well for that child, or maybe for all the children in the school. So I love that notion of that sort of informal conversation, informal reading, where parents too can pick up the information and bring that to the teacher.
Yeah, it is important that it starts at home. It starts with the parents being concerned first. You reach out to your teachers. Your teachers are there. I mean, I can only speak for OUSD. I mean, they have open houses. They do outreach. They try to get the parents involved. It's like it really does take a village to raise a child. And you're totally right about reading with the child at an early level, and don't talk down to your child. Don't use like baby talk or anything like that. I mean, introduced vocabulary. It encourages them, and then it gives them confidence. And I think that's really important. Like you said, when you read with them, watch if they skip over words, if they're stumbling. Those are the signs that tell you maybe I should talk to my child's teacher. Be involved is the most important advice I could give.
Candida, there's a question in the audience. Someone had mentioned that you had said, kids learn in different ways. Could you explain what you meant by that? This person believes that the belief is that students all learn the same way, but maybe some more naturally than others.
Yeah. So what I meant by that is a lot of kids are visual learners. They need pictures. They need to, they learn through repetition, through audio, through videos. So they're all at different levels. Some of the kids, like I said, ELs, they need a lot of repetition. They need you to speak to them in short phrases, where an EO complete sentences. So they're all at different levels. As we teach, obviously we want to teach the same curriculum, but when we pull out the small group, see where they're at. Maybe you have a group of kids that are just learning their letters. Maybe you have another group that's just learning their sounds. Then we have kids that are blending words. So they're all at a different pace. I have in my classroom, we're doing SIPS groups. I started with 9 groups, and now I've been able to combine them because I've seen growth, and I'm down to 7 groups. So, it's working. But it's also up to the teacher to structure it at their pace. These lessons are designed for if they're beginning or if they're advanced. So we're teaching the same systematic, explicit lessons, but at the child's level where they're learning.
Candida, let me piggyback off that. What special issues do you see facing ELLs? Does the same science of reading thinking hold for that community?
What I notice is that with my kiddos, especially coming in the beginning, it's a lot of shyness. They feel that they're going to make mistakes. They can't speak up. Sometimes it's natural in some cultures that they raise their voice, not meant to yell. So these kids can be fearful of it. A lot of the sounds sound a little bit different, especially with the Spanish, like the ñ. And there's that confusion. So being able to have strategies in the classroom for them, kinesthetic movements. I do a lot with my hands, as you can see, especially when I do nursery rhymes. When I taught TK and kinder, I was constantly doing hand movements, and these kids were getting it. A lot of repetition for them, checking for understanding. So not only our ELs, but all our kiddos need that. They would benefit from all type of strategies that we give just our ELs.
I have a question. I have a question for you, Candida. Have early literacy tutors at your school?
At the moment, we don't have tutors. We do have a literacy coach that offers classes for parents if the child is struggling, recognizing letters or just the phonemes. We're actually trying to do teacher partnerships where the parents could come into the classroom during PE time, and we're teaching them how to write sentences, how to use a timer and pencil to do fluency with their child. But as I know right now, I know there's outside tutors, but not in our school. We do have like an ACEs program, which they help with homework, but not explicit tutors.
Okay. Yeah, because
But you're basically training parents to be tutors, it sounds like.
Yeah, we open it up to the whole school. We started with a few parents. It's growing. It's great, especially right now, second semester in first grade. We got to get these kids reading fluency passages. We do iReady and we do Dibbles. What I noticed with my Dibbles assessment this second time around mid-year, my kids were decoding, but they didn't have that fluency. So they were reading CVC words, which is 3-letter words, consonant, vowel, consonant, but they were going at a slow robotic pace. So a technique that I always say, get a timer. It's if these kids know all their sounds and they're able to decode these words, just push a little bit with the fluency. And also with sight words, we're not no more reading them out of memory. They have to be able to sound them out and decode these. And they have to know all their sounds, their digraphs, their diphthongs, know how to read those blends in words. So there's a lot that they have to know in the beginning. So that's why it's very important to have structure, be consistent with these programs that are offered. But that consistency, that monitoring the child, did they make progress and movement? I brought that up last time, is our groups don't always stay the same throughout the year. We need to be able to move them around. I started with 9, I'm at 7. So I'm hoping that my groups will get closer because these kids are growing and moving up levels. So I'm really excited with the mastery test that they took last week.
So I want to jump in. There's a number of questions from the audience. It seems like there's general agreement about what works, at least on this panel. So that being said, what's the holdup? What's taking so long? Why aren't things moving faster?
I can answer kind of part of that, and I'm sure Sue will jump in on stuff I don't touch on, because there were also some comments and questions. I saw a few about universal screening and dyslexia screening, and that's a key piece and something we need to talk about that I think probably parents are unaware of this. So 40 other states screen kids in K through 2 for risk of dyslexia. That does not mean you're doing a full assessment on every kid to see if they're dyslexic. It's a short 15, 20-minute screener to see if they're at risk for it. And then if they were, you may monitor the kid for a little bit or actually recommend that they get an assessment to see if they're dyslexic. Doing that is hugely important because the earlier you can find out that a kid has dyslexia, the more likely they are to get more of that systematic instruction, maybe still in their tier 1 in their classroom, maybe in tier 2, which is with, an aid, one-on-one or supplemental. And the earlier you get that, the more likely they are to eventually be on grade level. I know this personally. My son did not get the intervention in those grades and is still far behind and will probably always be slightly behind if ever able to catch up. And so most kids do not get screened in California at all. There are a few districts who do it, but it is not mandated. There was a bill in the legislature the last 2 cycles that sailed through the state Senate and then was held hostage in the assembly, did not get a hearing and was not voted on. And so hopefully this year that may change. There's, different people in Sacramento now, so we'll see. But it is ridiculous that California doesn't screen. It also would save us a lot of money. I think people often say things in education cost an exorbitant amount. They do. But when you have a child with dyslexia who's getting tier 2 and tier 3 interventions in later grades, that's costing districts tens of thousands of dollars for one child. When we're talking about a screening, which is relatively cheap, can be done now. I mentioned 40 other states do it. So there are screeners that are available. States like Texas with large EL populations do it. Like California, we could do it. There should be nothing holding us back. And there's just not the political will to do it. So I would say parents have asked, where can I advocate? You can advocate for passing mandated dyslexia screening. And I will just end this, it must be mandated, because if it is just a recommendation, which it currently is in right now in California, it won't be done.
So Megan, what is your advice to parents? What did you learn through your experience? If you suspect your child is dyslexic,
so
what are you entitled to?
Yes. So number one, and I know in the resources that will be shared afterwards, there will be a link because there are sort of some timelines with special education services and how quickly districts have to be responsive to you. I won't list all those now, but as a parent, if you suspect your child is dyslexic, you can ask for an assessment for special learning disability. You are entitled to that. The district is required to respond to you with a plan within 15 days, then an assessment. There's kind of a 60-day window under which it must be conducted, and you hold an IEP meeting if your child is eligible for one. An IEP is an individualized education plan that if a child has dyslexia, they should get. There is federal law, there is state law. So parents are entitled to this. They are often just unaware. It's also sometimes tricky in districts for teachers to recommend this. Candida can speak to it more, but frankly, I have found not resistance from teachers, but like an inability to move as quickly as if when parents ask for it. There's more of a lengthier process when it is originated from a teacher. So I would 100% encourage parents, if you suspect this, to do that. If the district does the assessment, I want parents to know that is free. You do not pay for that. And so I know people may hear those assessments are very expensive. They are if you have to do them on your own, but you should not have to do that.
I want to know if I could just go back also to another part of Anne's question, which is why is it taking so long? So part of it is, you're right, the screening of students. Absolutely, Megan. Another part, as I said, the teacher prep programs. I know California has passed something that says in 2 years, I think 2025, their teacher prep programs have to accord with the science. All right, that's 2 years from now. That's like 2 years from now. That's like a whole nother generation of kids. And what I want to tell you is that states like Mississippi, Tennessee, North Carolina have all said, okay, we also have a whole batch of teachers who never got it. So we're going to teach them what they need to know to get into the classroom. So I would suggest, and whether I can't believe they wouldn't share, and they're having real success on the data, as Candida said, real success on many more students reading. So I would like call up the Mississippi State Department. They started it. North Carolina's on it. Tennessee's on it. And ask them, will they share their materials, or can they show you? I mean, it's not just a week-long thing. I think it's a year-long or maybe 2 years long of training to teachers, because we can't let a whole nother generation of kids continue to do this with teachers are left. I mean, Candida knows how to teach it. Wellness knows how to do it, but not everyone does. And so some teachers, what are they supposed to do? And then they get handed a curriculum like balanced literacy that helps them not at all.
Sorry, let's talk about teachers a little bit. One of the things on this project that I've noticed is how many teachers are actually getting the training on their own dime and on their own time. And they're not, I mean, I just think that that's absolutely tragic. I think that teachers deserve our support, especially now in this post-COVID era. They actually have enough on their plate. Do we all think that teacher training is the key to solving this issue? Megan?
I do. And again, I would love to hear Candida talk about her own personal experience here. I will just say a teacher at one of my kids' schools recently mentioned that she wanted to go back and get her master's in literacy, but that the Cal State school closest to us, their master's program is still based in balanced literacy. I mean, that's a state-funded program that is teaching teachers completely the wrong way. So, that to me, is really challenging, but I'd love to hear from Candida and her personal experience.
Yeah. Well, I think with the curriculum, what I notice is that you need to learn it well. You need to learn it. You need to put it into practice, because a lot of the times, being 16 years teaching, I've been through so many curriculums, and they're teaching us for a day or two, and then we are expected to go in the classroom and teach it, where we haven't got enough practice. So in order for it to show great results, we need to put into practice with each other, maybe a student example, and be able to give time. I know with our district, Lancaster district, I will have to say that the training has not been on our own time. Most of them have been able to during the school day. In my old district, we were not able to leave the classroom or have time during if the kids were in our PLCs to do these trainings, or after school, it had to be after hours. So that was a little bit more difficult, and people were burnt out by the end of the day, and going to these trainings is just listening, take in. So for curricula to be beneficial and work well, it needs to be taught when the teachers have a fresh start and be able to practice, put it into practice, and also check on the teachers. How are you doing with the program that we have with this, which is Fahegrity, which is a morning program that we do. We every single day we're consistently teaching it. It focuses on phonemic awareness and phonics. It's a 5-minute lesson that we do every single day, and it's quick. They would come in and check on us and make sure, do we have any questions? We would watch videos. We would practice with each other. Same with the SIPS programs. We're seeing each other teaching, figuring out what is the one thing that went well. What can I pull for that teacher teaching it? What strategy can I implement? Just sharing resources with each other and debriefing. A few minutes in, let's debrief. How is it working? What can another person use? What can another teacher use that you're doing well? So it is hard when you're thrown a new curriculum every few years and you're expected to teach it and know it. You're barely getting used to one, and then all of a sudden we're doing this one. It's like, what? So it's really hard on teachers, especially if you're an intern or you just have your BA and you're trying to get all these CSET and all your RECA assessments, state assessments done. It's very hard, and they're just trying to get their job done. And but being teaching so many years, it's been very helpful, and I try to support my colleagues, and I'm learning as I go too. It's not perfect, but we got to do what we can for these kids. I always tell them, you're my baby. I'm going to teach you wherever you're at. This is what I know. I know you need this. So I'm going to support you in every way, and having that parent communication and letting them know where they're at.
So I just want to add, can I just add one thing that both Megan and Candida said about training? Totally agree. Training essential. And something I want to underscore, something that Candida said, that you said, Candida, which is you worked along with other teachers to get better at this. So it's not just that you send a teacher, they go and learn something and then they're doing it all by themselves. You had people that monitor you, you work together to say what went well, what didn't go well, what do you do, what do I do? And that's what we know about really good professional development. And the last thing I'll say about that is, Karen, I agree it's training, but then if you give teachers balanced literacy curriculum, you've cut them off at the knees. So it has to be combining solid training and then curriculum. And I think Megan made mention of this, that there are several states now that have passed laws that said we demand an evidence-based curriculum. I've read from some of the reports from California, they don't want to do that because it's local control and they don't want to do that. But then our students don't learn how to read because teachers can only, teachers are handed curriculum. What are they going to do? No, they got to use it usually.
So we are blowing up with lots of questions in the audience. So trying to tackle two that are separate questions, but I'm going to throw them out there, whoever is willing to respond. One question stemmed with, what about those older students who maybe missed that window? Maybe it's the middle school level, maybe it's higher. What could be done to meet the needs of those students? Separately, different question about comprehension. So with the science of reading, where does comprehension play a role? And where does that come into play?
I want to jump in on comprehension because I want to jump in on the fact that to be a good foundational reading skills, absolutely essential and necessary. But I'm going to tell you something else that the research tells us that also needs to be added, and that is knowledge. Knowledge about the world, which parents can help a lot with, by the way, like Relva said, so it can start at home, a whole lot of learning at home. Because what we know is the more we know, the more words we know, the more words we know, the better we read. It's like having Velcro in the brain, where you know yourself, like if you're reading about the Civil Rights War, right? Like if you know something about it and who the players were and what they were, now you're going to read a speech from that time or whatever. You have the Velcro in the brain to be able to begin to understand it. And so knowledge building, I actually, like when I talk about science of reading, I include the foundational skills, and then I include comprehension of complex text, where you're building your knowledge, which becomes really, really important piece. Because it's, and I'm sure Cantita can talk to this and Relvis as well. It's systematic, rigorous practice, assessments, monitoring. But I don't think Candida or Relvis just do foundational skills. They have a day filled with lots of reading and talking and writing and so on and so forth, which is a really important complement to foundational skills.
I have a question for everyone. How did we get away from knowledge-based curriculum? Because it seems like that is sort of a national trend as well, towards skills and away from sort of gradually building knowledge, which seems like a catch-22, specifically for older students. Even if you can catch them up today on how to read well, you can never go back to teach them what they might have learned had they learned how to read earlier.
So here's what I want to say. Comprehension strategies, asking questions of the text, summarizing text, those kind of things. Those are really good strategies for students to learn. And what happened, and there's a research base for them, I want to say that. But here's the thing. You use those when you don't understand a text. You don't just, that's not all of what you want to do. So what you really want to do is what is this author saying to me? What questions do I have of the author? What knowledge am I supposed to bring with this? How do I take the knowledge I already had and add it to what this author is saying? And so what happened was, and this happens in education a lot, is we think, okay, there's a research base for comprehension strategies, so now we're going to bang away at comprehension strategies. I mean, I remember visiting a classroom, and they were doing a poem, and all I can tell you was a poem on dogs. And the teacher had them going through the poem and figuring out like what questions they were going to ask and what would they, how would they paraphrase this one and what they summarize this. And and then they had a big discussion about their answers, what questions they raised. I had no idea what the poem was about. I don't think the kids knew what the poem was about. So I think that's one of the things that happened And then we got away from this notion of building knowledge about the world, which, by the way, anyone who has a child or anyone who has a grandchild or niece knows that kids want to know about the world. They want to know how it works. And I know Roy Elvis can talk to this because he probably works with kids all the time wanting to know about this, that, or the other thing about the world.
Oh, most definitely. I was just gonna say, yeah, most definitely. I have my kiddos. Sometimes it's even difficult to start the session because they want to tell me about their day, and then they ask me questions. And then, doing the SIPS program, not only do we do the reading and we're learning fluency, they include a little picture, because like Candida said, we learn in different ways also. Some are through rote, some through conversation, some through pictures. And a lot of the times the kids look at the picture and, oh, look at the slides. I have a slide. I went to slide yesterday with my grandparents, and that just starts the conversation. Then, of course, I have to rein everything back in is we got to keep on going. Let's keep on going. So, yeah, definitely.
And also with the upper grades, I also taught 5th grade for 2 years. What I noticed with reading comprehension is that some kids were not able to recognize or decode the words. They were still 2-3 years behind. So obviously it's building that practice with them, having a separate group and building fluency once they were able to decode these words. Also with word recognition, the kids they need to understand what they need to comprehend language as well. So reading comprehension goes with language and word recognition. And if these kids are reading at a slow pace, still trying to decode, trying to read these words, like you said, Suzanne, they're going to lose it. They're going to forget what they completely read. So it's very important, coming back to fluency, no matter what grade you're at, if you see your child, they know how to read simple words, get them to try to read a couple in a page. Build that fluency, 1-minute timers. I've done it many years, and we've done progress monitoring, and we see the difference because now that they're fluent reading, they're able to focus on the comprehension part and all those different why questions, who, what, when, where, why questions, right? But they cannot be asked that if they're still trying to figure out what those 2 words mean, especially with sight words. And I saw that a lot in 5th grade, and it was just constant practice. You started here reading 20 words per minute. Now you're reading here. Let's focus on what the text was about. Obviously, there are times for that, but when you want these kids to be able to be very well at reading comprehension, they need to know what they're reading. They need to understand what the words mean. So language is very important to constantly talk to your child. I read somewhere that taking 30 seconds to have a conversation with no interruptions, just going back and forth. And it's very interesting how much these kids have to say, asking them how their day was at school. It was okay. Okay, well, what did you do? We know that they're learning something for in language arts and math. They went outside, even if they just have a discussion of what they did with their friend, as much talking as you can. Pull it out. I know it's sometimes you come home tired. I'm a parent too of 4 children. I'm tired. While you're cooking, while you're doing bedtime, bath, whatever it is, have that conversation. So you know as well what your child was doing at school. Oh, science. We're learning about shadows. We drew a shadow on the floor. And add to that you can ask them questions as well. So
Candida and Megan, there's lots of questions about how to approach teachers if you feel that your child is not being served and that you want to address an issue, whether it's trying something new for your child, whether it's one-on-one. How would you, what tips would you suggest parents employ when approaching a teacher about this specific issue?
So from the parent perspective, as Candida already talked about, I think it's amazing when teachers have really open lines of communication and start that from the beginning of the year. I've been fortunate that almost all of my kids' teachers have done that. Certainly like technology now makes that easier. Candida mentioned Class Dojo. It's a popular one. Here in Oakland, we use Parent Square. So, there's easy ways to kind of constantly message your teacher. I think the other thing is don't wait until a parent-teacher conference. I think there's always that, let me just wait till October, November. Here in California, we start school early August. So that's like months of something going by and something might be wrong. And while a teacher certainly is often aware, they have 25 other kids in the class sometimes. Candida saying 30. So, who they are also worried about and so they're not seeing everything that you're seeing at home and being with your child all the time, whether it's related to reading or otherwise. I think, here, not all districts do this, but hopefully most have some sort of assessment. Here in Oakland, we use iReady 3 times a year. So ask your teacher for that data. They should be willing to give it to you, but they don't always, give it to you just outright. So you should ask for that. Sometimes it's complicated to understand, even if you, one, can read English or can't, or, are trained. They're challenging to understand. So have a meeting with your teacher to understand where your kid is, if they're approaching grade level, areas where they're falling short. Things that you can possibly do with them at home if they're open to that. Although I will say, for parents who do have struggling readers, I always sort of caution that you don't want to make reading with your kid so burdensome that they just refuse to do it. And for dyslexic kids, that's often the case. So don't push it if it's really that terrible, but there are certainly, kind of gamified things you can do with your kids around phonemic awareness, letter recognition at the really early stages, and make it more fun. So I think open communication, have the data and understand the data, and then keep having those conversations throughout the year.
I have a follow-up. What if your teacher is a true believer in balanced literacy? And there are, certainly lots of educators who are really passionate about balanced literacy. How would you begin to have that conversation?
Well, that's hard.
Because I do feel like that's something that doesn't come up as actually a lot of people believe in it.
I have been told by one teacher before that all kids learn to read when they're ready. And if you tweak that in a certain way, I guess there is some truth to that some kids will just read when they're 4 years old magically, and others will need everything we've talked about. But in reality, what that's saying is, well, all kids will just get there. That's kind of that balanced literacy, kumbaya, put them in a corner with the book and they'll just figure it out, right? My 10-year-old was
it's wonderful.
Was in a classroom like that, right? Where, it was the 3 cueing method was very much alive and well. He was guessing, what do you think it would say? If you hear those types of things like run, what does the picture tell you? Right. So I think now, look, I understand why teachers think and feel that way, because again, they have not been provided with the training in often cases to be effective teachers using a different curriculum. They have, as Emily Hanford has said, they were sold a story, right? We all were. And if you haven't listened to that podcast, you must. But I get why it all seemed so wonderful. But having been on the kind of receiving end of that with a child who really struggled, it's not the kumbaya. It's not everyone's going to learn how to read. And so I do think there's a compassionate way to approach people who kind of need a shift in mindset, but to do it in that compassionate way, to say, my child's really struggling. Here's what I think they need. How can they get that? And again, in a district that is still using balanced literacy, it's not up to that teacher often to make that change, right? So that's part of the problem. There are teachers who will go rogue. One of them, was featured in the Right to Read movie, who will do that and do it because they know it's the right thing to do. But I'm not putting that on teachers to do that. They're in a predicament if they're in that district, right? So, that's more than not going to the teacher. That's going to your district to advocate for change too.
Sue, I saw you. It looked like you had something to say.
Oh, well, I just was bravoing here, and I also want to say that what Megan just said, which is teachers are handed this. One thing about the whole, when you think of balanced literacy, doesn't it sound nice? Balanced literacy. Don't we want balanced things in our lives?
Sounds ideal, doesn't it?
It does. And what happened was that people that believed in this, naturally, you do it. They then put those words in sort of in concrete in curriculum, which then they have a financial desire to sell. Let's be clear. Districts have bought it. So there's a financial and there's an emotional piece to that, because as we've heard Candida said, she's had to deal with like 3 or 4 different curriculum, and it's hard to change. I mean, I think if a teacher's using balanced literacy, sometimes they have been made to be true believers. In part, also, I just want to go back to the training. If they haven't had the training, it's scary to think how you're gonna teach systematic, explicit, daily lessons in foundational skills. It's technical. So I want to encourage people to look at the data from balanced literacy. There isn't a lot. It's very tiny and specific, and you can't always tell what kids they've tested. And I just think that the research is clear. It's settled. Let's stop this. And if I could just dump on balanced literacy a bit more, maybe I'm going to get a call from their lawyers after this, because they put kids in just right text, just right. They assign kids based on, so Candida, if it's one of your students that taking a little bit longer to kind of master all this, they put them in just right text, which are then simplified text, which means they don't get the vocabulary, they don't get the complex syntax, they don't get the knowledge they need. So what happens? They stay behind, they lag behind. So there's a knowledge issue problem as well.
There was a question. Sorry, Karen.
No, go
I
for it.
apologize. Lots of questions. And there was a question earlier in the chat about local control and the role it has played on this particular issue in California. You want to speak to that at all, Sue?
Yes, because most of the other states like Mississippi, North Carolina, Tennessee, guess what? They're all local control. But they can they can say that there has to be evidence-based curriculum. So not just anything goes, because there's still a whole wide range or a good range of choices. I mean, and I don't know if Meredith is listening to this, but the Knowledge Matters campaign, or we did a look at 6 of what we think are top curriculum that have the foundational skills, that have comprehension, that have knowledge-based things. So I think a state can say, it has to be evidence-based. I mean, my goodness, these are our kids. These are our kids. And just to say one more thing, when Megan, I wish I had taken it down as a quote. You said reading is life, or reading, I don't know quite how you put it, but boy, if you can't read, imagine what it feels like. Imagine how scary it is to not be able to read. And every child can learn to read. Every child can learn to read.
I agree with you, Suzanne. And I want to tell parents that it's never too late to reach out to your teacher, your child's teacher. It's second semester. It doesn't matter what time it is, reach out, even if it's attending a PTA meeting and knowing that the teacher is there, and school site council, anything that you can go to. Sometimes it needs to be simple and informal. It doesn't have to be a conference. It's to sit down, look at the data. All right, let's get to know each other. Tell me about my child. How do you see my child in the classroom during unstructured time, during recess? And open up that conversation and ask the questions. Then you could ask to see the data. We have it available. I have a parent that asked me, and I'm like, of course, I'm very excited. I reached out to my literacy coach. I'm like, get me all the data. I want to see those 5 pages, not just something simple where it tells you they scored at kinder or first grade level. No, they want it very explicit. And it's that ongoing communication. Figure out, how do the parents communicate? Some people send letters home. Some people have digital, like Class Dojo. Maybe I have a colleague that she loves doing phone calls after school or Zoom meetings with parents. Find out what is best for the teacher. Reach out to the office, the ladies in the front office, your admin. What can you do to help get together with this teacher and have that bond, so you guys are on the same place and knowing about your child, because we are here to teach your child and do the best that we can. We want to see growth. We celebrate every success that they have. And like Megan was saying, we have so much on our plate. We have 30 kids. Upper grade has 34. There's so many different things that we're doing with behavior. And if it's falling behind, wherever they're at, we have a lot on our plate, but we do not put any parent to the side. We are here for you, but please be the advocate, speak out to your child. And it starts now. Don't wait for the beginning of year. Go ahead and reach out today.
Now, for those youngest readers, there was questions in the chat about the two spectrums, right? Those students maybe who are older, who maybe missed. And what about those really young ones, the ones before kindergarten, whether it's preschool, pre-K, transitional kindergarten? How are their needs being met, or what can parents do to help prepare them for success?
Well, I will jump in because I would say that for the little ones, even before school, and I'd love to hear Candida and Ruel to talk about this, is if you can read to your child, read with your child, read, and then build knowledge on the neighborhood and the family, storytelling, watching history and science videos together, with all of that creativity we heard from Ruel. I think those are the kinds of things that you can do, because when students come, and Candida, you can speak to this, when they come knowing how a book works and knowing that how print works, from left to right and up to down, and they're used to books and they love books. And I know that in some homes that's not possible, but if there's a way to make a literature rich, whether it's the school library or the public library, I think is really good. And then one thing I want to say about older students, and I wonder if Meredith has been writing about this in the thing, because she's doing a whole book on older students, but I want to underscore what Candida said about fluency practice. And it can be fun. I mean, you can take a speech and have students work together in pairs and prepare the speech for older students to be able to read it. And there's research that shows within 20 minutes, when you're reading a text, you can improve a student's fluency on that text. Now, that's powerful. I mean, and there's so many ways to do it. You can choral read, you can pair read, you can, you can do it with the teacher. You can, the teacher reads it aloud and the student follows along. So there's a lot to do, because fluency, students pick up the tone, they pick up the pace, they pick up the meaning. And then Candida's point about vocabulary being really, really important, which again ties to knowledge building, but also helping students with the vocabulary words, ways to kind of figure that out when they're reading. So I think fluency is a really important thing. And then if students have totally missed the foundational skills, I think there are ways to go in and help students. It's got to be different than it is with the little ones, right? But I think there are ways to go in and help them with what they've lost, and maybe what Candida said, which is really testing them in a way that what they didn't get, what sound, symbol correspondences, blends, whatever they didn't get, what are they not understanding, so they can be helped to understand. But then I would say fluency. And if I could rewrite the Common Core State Standards again, I would put fluency all the way up to grade 12.
Yes. Previously, I was also a TK teacher. I taught it for 2 years. I think TK stands for transitional kinder, prior to kindergarten. It's a lot of play, a lot of talk with your child, the vocabulary. What are things? What is a microwave? What is a stove? These are books. That's a shelf. Being able to know what's in their environment and using the terms, the vocabulary, having complete sentences. How does this work? What is this for? Why do we use a pencil? So that way, when they're first exposed in a classroom for the first time, they're clueless. There are students that come, they don't even know what scissors are. They don't even know how to hold a pencil. So anything that you can get in their hands, anything fine motor, we all have access to internet, most of us. Common Core standards, see what are the standards for kindergarten, so that way you can see where your child should be before they even enter kindergarten. YouTube, I mean, my son loves CoComelon. He learned every letter of the alphabet, 2 years old, and all on his own. I was always working, so grandma watched him. There's a lot out there. You just got to you make sure you are watching the videos with them. A lot of kids are able to navigate the iPad. There's a lot of resources that you can go on to. There's Starfall. There's just so many that I could say them all now, but even as simple as navigating, moving it, because that's our future, technology. And if they can get books that are read aloud to them, nursery rhymes, stories, there are a lot of things on there that there's an instructor, and they will ask the child the question. And you can see, I see my little son, and he's like repeating as if she's the teacher. So sometimes we don't know what there's just a lot out there. So I mean, YouTube, I'm a go-to. Look at the Common Core state standards. You could Google it. You can see what your child needs to know before they get there, so that way they don't fall behind.
There was so much available out there. I'm thinking back to my two children when they were young and just learning to read. And there was a video that phonetically just sounded out all the letters. And I still remember those songs. My kids still remember those songs. My son's about to graduate high school. And he says, the A says ah, the A says ah. Every letter makes a sound. The A says ah, so it's amazing what's out there, especially at our fingertips right now with the internet. I did want to take a moment now. We are at the hour. We are at a record number of not just attendees, but certainly questions asked. So thank you to our audience who have asked some wonderful questions. We've tried to answer as many as possible in the chat or live. A very big thank you to every panelist for your time, for your energy, for the conversation. This is something that EdSource is truly committed to continuing writing about, talking about, and exploring. To our moderator, Karen, as always, thank you for your great moderation and the great work that you've done on our ongoing series. And for everyone behind the scenes, it really does take a huge team at EdSource and beyond. Thanks to everyone.